Hi, I'm your host, Rick Sessinghaus, and excited to launch Flow Golf Podcast. Each episode, we will share stories, interview experts, and share cutting-edge strategies for peak performance. Here's my co-host, Hallam Morgan, to explain more about FlowCode Golf.
Thanks, Rick. FlowCode Golf is a framework of strategies, principles, and techniques that take us from fear to the state of flow, the state of optimal performance, and the zone where we play our best golf. You can find out more about FlowCode Golf at www.flowcode.golf. And I just want to finish up by saying this podcast is as much your podcast as it is ours. So please ask questions, provide feedback, and get engaged. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome back to the Flow Golf Podcast. I'm super excited to be back here again for another episode with Mr. Josh Alpert and Rick Sessinghaus. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit different, right? We've just all come back from a huge trip over to Asia, sharing FlowCode principles with juniors, with coaches. And I want to talk a bit about that trip, some of the behind the scenes of what we got up to, but also some of the lessons that we learned, some of the things we saw in the junior golfers, and some of the development in these countries that not all of us hear huge amounts about when it comes to golf. So Rick, I want to throw it to you first. What were some of the things that stood out from the trip that we just came back from?
Yeah, it was very interesting because I can now compare it to the first trip that you and I, Hallam, went to Asia in 2024, and I didn't know what to expect then. And I think what we've seen is this really unbelievable dedication of these, we'll call them associations for right now, junior tours and stuff, that want high-level coaching. They want to experience it in real time and in person. There's just this passion about golf. And again, how much they value coaching. And we saw that the first time around, and I would say we saw it even more so the second time around. And what led to the second opportunity going out is because the first trip went so well that they wanted more. And not only wanted more, but they wanted a more robust program, which led to obviously all three of us now going, which was really, really cool from a coaching standpoint to be able to share it with you two guys, and yet see that each one of us created a program that people could look back and go, wow, that was different, that was powerful, that made a difference. And we'll talk more about it in a moment, but having, like in Thailand, having 3 days of training that actually leads up to a tournament setting doesn't get much better than that, right? Does the actual FlowCode principles work under pressure is always, as a coach, we want to see. So overall, framing it was fantastic. We'll get into more of just what I appreciated is how much they value coaching and such like that. So it was great to have you two guys there. We had a lot of fun, which we'll get into. And I think as a coach, creating different programs that make a difference is always the goal.
Absolutely. And just to frame it for everyone listening, so the start of the trip, we went to Thailand. We did a few events in Thailand. We did a 3-day event that, as Rick mentioned, then finished up with a tournament. We managed to connect with, obviously, the guys, Jonathan Bibb, the guys at Jaga, Josh, and we'll talk a bit about what we learned from that experience as well. And then we went out to, myself and Josh, we went to China for 2 different locations, and we'll talk about that. And then I headed to Vietnam. But Rick, you mentioned obviously what amazed you was kind of that passion for coaching and the willingness to invest in development of players, but not just coaching, obviously mental coaching, right? And I think often we would expect that the US and Europe, that we're pushing the boundaries of what should be optimal and we're all investing in the mental game. But actually, from what I've seen, like there's more investment or willingness to invest in the mental game in Asia from what I've experienced. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that or what you've experienced, but would love to chat a bit about it.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that from a global standpoint, obviously golf is a global sport. There's more professional tours across the world now. Those tours are higher and higher quality. We now bring it down to junior golf and the junior tours, and where do they want to go? They want to play in American universities and colleges. So there's now a lot more linking of the industry. And with that, you do see these associations, these national teams really push and say, yes, we want to support these junior golfers to succeed at college and then beyond. And that's, to your point, you see them investing in stuff just outside of their country. They're open to other people's philosophies, and they look to get the best of the best. And of course, we consider FlowCode to be one of the best coaching systems there. And so I think it's the value part of it, and they're always looking outside maybe just of their country to be able to do that. But they're looking at developing a program now, not just a one-off for just a couple players.
So Josh, it was your first trip to Asia. I mean, you nearly didn't make it into China with the poker chips in your suitcase, but we got there eventually.
Yeah. Are we going to get into that story?
apart from that experience, what did you learn? I guess what maybe surprised you, and what did you enjoy most about the trip?
Yeah. So, and I would say, so first time being in Thailand and being in China. I've been international before. Certainly my wife's from South Africa, so I've done a bunch of travel there. I've been to Greece. I've been to some different places around Europe. So being away from the United States is something that I'm very familiar with throughout a lifetime, but Thailand, China specifically never stepped foot. So I went in and I do this, and again, I'm going to ring into this whole larger junior golf thing here. Zero expectations. I didn't go in thinking, oh my God, I'm afraid of this or the food of that, or what if the people are this, or what if the people of that. There was zero expectation from my part other than getting on the plane with Rick, landing, and just being open to a culture, open to a new student base, open to different parents, open to different facilities and temperatures, while doing the best I can to provide what it is that we do at FlowCode, which is premier elite coaching for these players. So I tried to really do sort of the pre-tournament, if you will, sense of I don't want to have anything other than let's just see what happens here. Super impressed across the board in macro from a cultural standpoint. I thought both countries, beautiful facilities, beautiful places, and not to sound overly generic, but like the people were amazing that we dealt with. The kids starting in Thailand, Rick, you kind of talked about it, the openness to learn, the eyes of like, what are you going to say? And how can, like, there was an absolute openness and a hunger for information, a not shy. It was really cool to see how open they were and how easy it was going to be for us to go, oh, we can just dive right in and go do what we do without having to really tiptoe around. I think was a great, not surprise. I mean, it was cool that that's the way that worked out. But Rick, I would say to you, and I kind of had just jotted some notes before we jumped on here. What was I most impressed by? Effort levels, just incredible. They are going to do the work and practice and go nuts. Focus levels, their willingness to take notes on what we're talking about, ask detailed questions when they didn't understand. And then obviously one just in our larger stuff we talk about in the States and things, I thought from an etiquette standpoint, unbelievable respectful as individuals, unbelievably respectful as a culture. And I just think that when we start to look at those larger human traits, that when we start to build, how are we building better golfers? The way you do anything is the way you do everything. We in the States, I think as we come back to here, I do try very hard to work with my customers and clients to say, hey, let's fix divots, let's take care of things, let's do those things. It really made me come back and realize how important it is for us to stand on honesty and for us to stand on etiquette, because when those players are those things, it really will help to elevate who they are. So I think that from a grand standpoint, the people themselves, I was just deeply impressed with some of the cultural aspects.
No, absolutely. Go on, Rick.
No, I was just going to say from a mindset standpoint, right? With FlowCode, we coach certain mindsets, and you brought up a few in there. First was the awe mindset, right? They come and they meet us, and they're kind of like, oh, this is really cool. We got these 3 great coaches with FlowCode. Oh, this is cool. Look at the stories they're saying, right? And so there's this awness about it. There was always gratitude, right? They were always grateful for the opportunity, and literally in every single where they're putting their hands together, and there's always a thank you. So we had that. The other thing that Josh, you're the expert at is playfulness, and we saw that maybe after the first hour or so when we break down a few little, then they became very playful. They became very involved with the games that you provided. They got so excited, right? So when you start, and that's only 3 of the mindsets. They also had some other ones, but when you start putting those ingredients together, we have a learning environment. They want to be there. They're motivated. They're having fun. And I think they're back to what you guys said about openness. They were open to do focus calm with the brainwave stuff. They were open to do some of the exercises that you did, Josh. They were open to some of the new information that I was providing. And I think when you put those mindsets together, you honestly have a recipe for success from a learning standpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, and just to jump on the back of what you said, Josh, I guess at the start of this conversation, we should say a big thank you to the guys that hosted us,
Yes.
whether that's Bay, Nop, Jonathan Bibb, moving then into China with Tristan and David Norkey, and then Vietnam with Mr. Son as well. So they're always, I mean, I've obviously been out to China multiple times, Thailand multiple times in the last year. And in terms of the way that we're hosted and the way that we're looked after is incredible. So if you are listening, a big thank you to you guys as well before we dive into the conversation. But why don't we start at event number 1? So event number 1 was obviously with Bay and with Nop at the Gens Tour final camp. It was a mind training camp. And why don't we dive into what that looked like, how we kind of structured that camp, and some of the stuff we learned specifically from those players. So I don't know who wants to get this kick-started, but all I'll say is ole, ole, ole.
So I'll jump in here. And I think what made this unique, again, knowing you're going to be with these 30 players for 3 days was unique. Knowing that we had a final, we'll call it, I don't call it a test, but they are now playing in a Ryder Cup format against each other. And so we knew that there was this end goal that they were training for. I think was unique, because I don't think we've ever done this one before, right, Josh? We haven't done multiple days with that kind of event. And I think we all had our 3 strengths that we were there, right? So I was doing a lot of education stuff indoors, talking about key concepts, a little bit more advanced than we've had before. And then back to the application is for them to be able to go to Hallam and do focus calm and measure the brainwave activity, measure their state, try some different flow triggers. And then with you, Josh, to be able to have those creative games, those and I say both creative, but also the gamification of putting them under pressure and helping them put these pieces together in a routine that was going to perform, and having it almost like this circuit training idea, I think was, again, the most beneficial way to do it anyways. And so that's kind of the structure, knowing that final day that they are going to be performing. They want to win. They're playing for their teams. They're playing, and there's obviously a lot of trash talking on both sides because we became captains of the other side. So that's the structure side of it. And so I'd love to now know from each one of you, how you integrated it and what their reaction was at your stations.
Yeah, no, I think it was almost a perfect recipe in a certain light. And obviously this is where, we all have our biases. We all talk the same things. I step in my own instruction where I sit. I do pieces of very serious, this is the curriculum discussion. There is technical stuff. There is learning lessons where there is really, we're digging deep into an individual player. And it's like, wow, we're working here. There's also a totally different side of this, which is just joy and fun and play and games. And I think that the balance of it all, I think what makes it and I come from the junior golf academy guy who is always kind of looked at more as play fun games, joy, yay. And if you just looked at it, you'd be like, that guy's just having fun. And those guys are more serious over there. I think that the truth is that it is both. And both sides of that coin we need to look across the table sometimes at these things and say, when we come into this very structured learning environment and we are showing them day 1, day 2, day 3, this is what we're learning. The subject matter is serious. We're talking about your minds. We're talking about training. We're talking about elite. The truth is that there were kids that were listening to us who have aspirations with a very short timetable of maybe going to a United States school. Let's not forget that our customer is elite junior golfer wishing and wanting to play college golf and beyond, with a very, very tight time window for them to maybe chase their dreams or not. This is a very serious thing that they came to. for us to establish we are here to meet your serious needs and we're going to deliver information and in a way where we're going to really help you is something that they need to do. That we did so in an environment where they got to be kids and have fun and create teams and games and be banter and all of the fun stuff that we do is equally as important. And I would argue almost more important from a setting standpoint, because if we can soften and loosen them into, wow, we are having fun and I can actually exist in my skin and then go do serious work. That is sort of this notion I can come to this tournament and have a lot of fun focusing and doing my business to compete at an elite level. How do we encourage both? And I think that was sort of our mission beforehand. Can we have fun and loosen them up so that they are not so serious, that their bodies can be more fluid and minds free, but then also really be focused on the material? And I think that it is actually, that is what it is. Can we help those players understand that they need to be both? And I think that you know, if we look back at it, I think that we achieved that from our standpoint. I thought we did a very good job of that. And I think that's kind of what makes the FlowCode brand and the people that lead it. That's why this works, is because it has to be both.
I love that, Josh. And I think that sums up exactly what we wanted to achieve. And I think that leads quite nicely into what I wanted to share, which is like, we wanted those, a lot of them were experiencing mental game training for the first time, right? That was the first mind training camp they had ever been to in their life. We want them to leave that camp going, that was the best camp I've ever been to. I had so much fun training my mind that I want to do it again. Because although, yes, of course, we hope we brought huge amounts of value and they took a lot away from that camp, we know that's just the start of the journey. So if they came away going, man, that was a bit boring and I didn't have that much fun, are they going to be motivated to go away and train their mind again? Like, absolutely not. Whereas if they come away saying, that was the best camp I've ever been to, I had so much fun, I was smiling, I was high-fiving, I was competing, that's the space we want them to be in, because now they're going to be motivated. Now they're going to want to train their mind more often. So I think it was, like you say, a combination of the two, but that was our main mission and goal with that camp for sure. And I think the fun part was definitely ticked off, that's for sure. There was so much high-fiving, so much smiling, so much laughing, whilst also being serious as well.
And part of that is we've said this before, the coaches need to be in that mindset. They need to be in that state. And sometimes, yes, I might be talking about a certain education thing, but by day 2, I'm doing silly things with them. I'm dancing. I'm doing like that. You guys are doing what you need to do. But we're being what we want them to be. We want them to be open. Yes. We want them to be vulnerable. We want them to have fun. We want them to also compete and be able to do some trash talking and all that stuff. So I think that's a key part for coaches out there, is we want these players to have fun. Is like, if you don't look like you're having fun, it's probably not going to translate. But of course, us three, the Three Stooges, had plenty of fun, right? And yet we still got.
Don't worry about the juniors. We had fun. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters, right? And I think that's where
certificates, I believe, would be fair to say. Holy cow!
And so that was key on that. And I think the uniqueness of. We even saw that they had icebreaker events in the evening. I mean, this is like all day, everybody. This is evening and dinner. I mean, so you're around these people for that long. It didn't get stale to me. It actually, in fact, we got closer and closer and closer. And I think that's what's part of it, is now we have a relationship with these players. We're now following them on Instagram, seeing their success and how happy they are. And I think that's as we know as coaches, it's a relationship, because that's the way we can develop. And they trusted us, and we saw that passion for them.
Absolutely. Josh, do you want to share some of the stories that occurred at the end of the camp that kind of brought it nicely together in a neatly tied bow, with, I think, one of the junior golfers, one of the boys, wrapping up his match, right, in some incredible style, and then also one of the girls on the final hole with her putt. There were some great stories where they were applying those FlowCode techniques that they'd learned throughout the last couple of days into that tournament environment.
Yeah. So, and again, it's just sort of, it's funny how these things go, right? You never know. Now they've got this Ryder Cup thing. And so the kids go out and play, right? So at the culmination of the event, the final morning, the kids are now playing in an event, and there was, I mean, there was like a TV crew guy out there with them. I mean, they're announcing the names on the first tee. They made it a pretty big event. And you could see on the driving range in the morning, and this is what we see, right? The seriousness, all of a sudden it was like, oh man, we're getting ready to play. One of the players, just as we go, because it's funny, like he's on the tee and he's not hitting his driver well. And I'm just sharing it in this context. And he had said, I'm really kind of struggling with my driver. And I was able to talk to him a little bit without, not diving in, but he was like, I'm working on something with my coach, and I don't know whether to do the thing I'm working on or do the thing I'm more comfortable with. And he was kind of in between, and he was kind of in between on the range, and he was just expressing this. And of course I'm going, uh-oh, here he's not in the most comfortable place, which is real, and it happens to everybody. But ironically, we step up on the first tee and he's there when it was his turn to tee off. And there's water right, and it's a par 4, and it's like literally we stepped up, and I'm like, this couldn't have been a worse hole for him to step up on. And you're just watching that he's really, really thinking technical stuff. We had purview into where he was, and he dumped the ball in the water. But the point is like it was, and I'm saying, I know it's easy. It was cool to see that we got the insight into he was having a technical struggle. He wasn't able to remove himself from that technical struggle, and he wasn't able to get to a place where there was a solution. This is what I'm going to do. This is the solution with how I'm going to deal with this struggle. He just kind of was marinating in the struggle, and he started poorly. Finished very, very well. The two stories at the very, very end that were cool was there was one match with a couple of boys and one match with a couple of girls, that one of the guys that we work with, who I think resonated with us as like, that kid had a real elite aptitude for mental game. One of the kids that we work with who were like, that guy, he's got it, right? And he's coming down, and he was 2 down with 4 to go. And then he makes a clutch birdie. And then we come down to the final hole, and he knows he has to make birdie to have his match because he's 1 down in his match. So he knows where he sits in that match. It turned out that point was actually the Ryder Cup clinching point as well. So we sort of knew it in the background. He didn't know it in the match, but he knew that it was really, really important because the kids were around and he was aware of the audience around the green. And we got to walk with him as he was coming up to the tee, and he sticks in just full routine, rhythmic drive right down the middle, sticks a wedge to about 10 feet, really, really surveys the putt. I noticed actually, and it was a detail, the other kid chips one from over the green, almost holes out his chip. I mean, bangs it off the flagstick from Impossibleville, right? So we're like, oh my gosh, this kid's going to just end this with an incredible chip. He watches the ball roll, kind of gets a little bit of a glimpse of the other player's shot as it drizzled by. How much did it play in? I don't know. But we're watching a player in a mental game 3-day clinic watch the detail of a fellow competitor's ball roll on a similar line, fully engage and lock in and hunt it. We videoed his thing, right? He is absolutely in the moment, focused on making this putt. He goes on to make the putt, right? And then, I mean, and we interviewed him like right afterwards, like, dude, do you realize you have the match. That was awesome. Do you realize that point was for the whole thing? He's like, oh my God, I had no idea. I just knew that it was important, and I just really wanted to make sure that I locked in. He took a moment where he knew it was big and didn't really even want to know how important it was, because he really, really wanted to focus on the micro details of what was going on. And I thought that was sort of, again, that's kind of what we coach. Whether you're the guy who wants to know the scoreboard because it motivates you to get focused, or whether you're the guy who actually really is probably better off not knowing anything about what's going on so that you can focus on your job, we really watched it happen. And afterwards, he said, I really did a good job of focusing. We have there's the breath before he walked in. Like, it's like ironic that we saw him do the thing on the final putt. That was an amazing experience. And it's like, of course, you could do that 1,000 times and never have it work out that way. But it was really cool to see the presence in the moment, the learning from other players' information, the use of a breath, the admitted sense of I don't know what's going on because I'm too busy focusing, that we got that account from that player in that moment sort of is like, that's why we've got to keep hammering these themes, because when they do it, it becomes possible, right?
Yeah.
So that was a culmination almost from our lens, right? Was
100%.
the thing happened.
Yeah, and then obviously that was phenomenal, and it was such a cool moment because everyone was around the green watching as well, and that moment for him is something he can anchor now, right? I think we don't often get those moments when we're growing up as junior golfers, and when he can anchor, okay, what did I do? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? Where was my focus in that moment when I played great golf and everyone was watching me and everyone was high-fiving me after? They're the moments we want people to anchor to take forward into the future. And then, Josh, obviously there was the girl on the final hole as well. And I think you had a great conversation with her after. I'd love for you to share with the listeners how that conversation went, because there's a really powerful lesson in that as well.
Yeah. Well, which one are we talking about? The
one who made the putt, and she said, like, yeah. I was shaking, like I was really nervous.
Yeah. So I got you. I just want to make sure there was a couple of really cool girl moments. Yeah, but yeah. So again, same thing. So we come down afterwards. This one ended up being for their final match. And I think, as it turned out, the boys' match was the one that decided it. Only it then ended up turning out that we were wrong, and this was the final match. So we kind of got duped by the scorecard. We're following along on the app, and it turned out that now this final match did matter. And this girl does. She has to two putt in order to actually win the thing again. So we now run the same scenario. Not a very long putt, but it was like 3 or 4 feet. But it was like, again, everyone's there. It's the big moment. It's the whole thing. Probably right edge, inside right uphill, maybe 4-foot putt. We watch her. She definitely appears to be uncomfortable. She walks around it a couple times. She's talking with her playing partner. She does step in, get behind the ball, gets herself settled, gets herself calm, does her whole thing, looks beautiful. It looked on TV like girl just stepped up, drained a putt. Awesome. Comes off afterwards and was like almost started crying and was breaking down because she was like, I was so nervous that because I saw everybody and people were mumbling, and I started to go, oh my God, I think this one's really important, because why would they all be mumbling? And she said, I think we were right there. We asked her, what were you thinking and what were you feeling? She's like, I knew that it was important. I kind of knew it. And I really felt myself be nervous. And I just kept telling myself, it's just a 4-foot putt. It's just a 4-foot putt. It's just a 4-foot putt. And she definitely was using the breath. We had talked a little bit about the shoulder up breath. And then an exhale breath where she sort of calms herself down. And she said, I just kept telling myself, it's just a 4-foot putt. It's just a 4-foot putt. It's just a 4-foot putt. And she used breath and she knocked the putt in. But she said, admittedly, I was really, really, really nervous. Yeah. But in the presence of those nerves, she went to a place that she felt would help her to chill. Yeah. And that she had the awareness to have a place to go is awareness. That she had begun to develop some skills to be able to use that awareness is the point. And obviously, in a perfect scenario, yes, 3 days is better than 1. If we have a relationship with these players over a larger period of time, and it's about applying the skills so that they become better at doing the breath works. They become better at the visualizations. They become better at blocking out the distractions. That it's not just awareness that helps them, but it's elite skill training that helps them to perform at the highest levels. And in a 3-day thing, we can do this. We can't get up here, but it was cool to start it and see it work. Ironically, for both the boys and girls, and on the final hole. So yeah, like it was pretty neat.
So cool. It was so cool when she said I used breath, and I think she also said I was recalling a putt that I made earlier in the round, and I was reminding myself of how I made that putt and bringing that into the present moment to remind myself I had the skills in order to hold this same putt as well. So combining a lot of those different techniques that we teach, cognitive techniques with flow recall, using sensory techniques with breath and visual, combining all of those techniques, it's something that obviously when we do these camps, we hope they'll implement on the range when we're practicing with them. It's something we hope they'll implement on the range when they're warming up. But to see them implement it in those moments of pressure, when a lot of the time we forget and we default back to what's comfortable, which is just like,
that's right,
get it over and done with as quickly as possible, or to like get tense and to fight it. But actually to see them implement the same techniques we'd been working with them in those moments was so powerful and so cool to see. So no, I appreciate sharing that, Josh. They were cool stories. So in terms of the next events then, obviously, Josh, we headed to see Jonathan Bibb at Jaga, which a slightly different scenario, right? We checked out the academy, and I think we were both really impressed with the culture that was being built there. Could you share a little bit of the insights of what you saw that impressed us from a FlowCode lens, and maybe how other academies, other teams could also apply some of those same concepts?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, maybe not foremost, but certainly first, the facility was incredible. And I mean, I mean, to have a short game area, we walked in and they were like, yeah, here's our little short game area. And it was like just this 100-yard area with multiple greens, a double tiered driving range with technology, with a room. So you look at it that way, where you go, wow, the first glance is like, this is a pretty badass place. But what got cool to us beyond that, because we've seen some good facilities before, and it's not like that's supremely unique, it was the culture that Jonathan created internally, which was, we walked into his office, and on the wall, he's got team captains for their group of kids. And they have a contract of like, I am responsible for, I will, like, it was tremendous that the kids were accountable to an ethic, to a conduct, to a, like there was ownership of who they were going to be when they were in this space. There's quotes on the different walls about respect for our culture, and this is our home, and we treat it a certain way. There's bag lockers where Jonathan was explaining the place was a mess when they got there, and then they had structured spaces where all the kids' equipment went, and it was neat, and it was clean, and there was ownership. And you just started to see where, like, man, you could see where if they had the space, but they didn't manicure the grass and they didn't really care about the holes, that it would be nice, but it would be okay. But they made it brilliant. You go to the indoor space, you're like, yeah, this is pretty cool. It's a space, but it's just a room. And I don't know what happens in a room. And then you're like, wow, I can see the culture and the importance of detail in here. You started to realize that at this academy, there were layers and layers and layers of thought that went into how can we create a culture of excellence. I'm sure in the instruction and in the detail, but just in the way that we designed the space, I was drawn by going, man, and Rick, you know, same thing when I stepped into your studio, and I'm now motivated to do some of these things in mine, to see the John Wooden thing up on the wall, the Pyramid of Success, to see a quote from a philosopher that was all about controlling what we can, to see these things and walk in. I didn't have to hear a word. If I never knew you and I walked in and I just took a quick journey around the room, I would know the importance and the message and the standard of the space that I was in. There's so many opportunities as coaches. How are we representing our space? How are we doing small details of instruction? Is it color coded? Is there a team versus team? How far can we go to create that? And all of those layers matter. I was just really impressed with that stuff before we even got to speak about anything instruction wise.
100%. And I think what I loved about that is the focus on both what we would call at FlowCode flow personality and flow performance, right? So the details in the moment of performance in terms of the training and the instruction and the drills and the games and all of those types of things. But then when we look at the culture, that desire to build flow personalities as well as flow performers, I think was so powerful, because as golf coaches, we can look at it and say, my only role is to help that player shoot lower scores. But that's not necessarily true, right? Our player is to develop that individual, yes, in their golf game, but I know both of you would take ownership in, like, I want to help develop this person as an individual as well. And we could see that at every facility, not just obviously the ones in Thailand, but in China and Vietnam. Every single place we went to, there's this huge desire and an alignment to our passion and our mission to help develop the individual as much as developing the golfer. And I think that's what excites me and what brings so much joy when we go out there, and why we're so aligned with all of the people that we work with, because we have that common mission. So Rick, I know you've spent your whole career focused on that as well, but anything else you want to share on kind of that flow personality concept and developing the individual, as well as, of course, helping that player get the ball in the hole in fewer shots?
Yeah, I mean, personality to me is made up of beliefs, values, past memories, but also intentionality, what my goals are. Personality is to lead to a behavior, and the behavior leads to a result. So yes, we talk about a flow personality, but we want to build that to create habitual behaviors that lead to a result. So to Josh's point, when we can create an environment which will be very much aligned with somebody's values, it could shift beliefs like, hey, I believe in myself and success is hard and discipline. Okay, that we are shifting personality. And I think what I want people to understand is that personality can be fluid. You can create, I mean, a lot of people are label themselves, I'm an introvert, I'm this, I'm that. Be careful of that, because I don't believe that, by the way. I believe it's fluid, and I believe when you can adapt, yet your environment is a key part of that. And so we want people to understand that, yes, your values and your beliefs are going to be, they are going to affect you, but we want more of that intentionality. We want you to have these goals, and then that leads to, what are the behaviors that I need to do day in and day out to lead to those goals? And these environments are helping that. I mean, it's like putting a seed in the ground, and like you nourish it, you stuff like that. If you just don't do anything with the seed, you're not going to get much out of it. And we saw just an unbelievable culture. We saw unbelievable support teams. I think the last thing I would say is that we were brought in with these wonderful people. Their teams, I mean, when we were in Thailand, they had multiple people there helping and making sure everything was just right. And I was very impressed with the whole culture on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Josh, from your perspective, again, obviously this was the first trip for you to Asia from a coaching lens. And from everything that you experienced, whether it was the culture, whether it was the facilities, whether it was the junior golfers, whether it's the other coaches we met, what's one thing, and this might be a hard question to put you on the spot, but what's one thing that you maybe are going to apply to your coaching that might be unique to previous based upon the trip?
So I'll say this, and it's not specific to where we were. Okay. And I grabbed it here. I really, as everyone knows, I'm not a big fan of complimenting Hallam. If I can avoid it, I will avoid it as much as I possibly can. But watching you in both countries use the focus calm in an organized instructional manner. And I've had one, and I've kind of dabbled with it. And to be honest, I've got a learning curve that I want to do more. But I watched you train with the device and really use the cards and use it in a practice environment and play environment. And I walked away with the trip as a student in this lens, much more understanding of the power of what this device can actually do to help create some awareness of where our mindset is, like a measurable tool. I was very impressed with how the players took to it, really experiencing the power of understanding how your focus levels and how what you did with this to get people to shift their focus and get themselves into productive places before they hit golf shots was really cool. I have been using this now every day since I've been back. I'm challenging my own self to see how I'm able to do it. I'm putting myself in the player space because it's important for us as coaches to do that. So I know maybe not where you thought I was going to go with this one, but really impressed with how you were able to utilize the device and the coaching to get people to better spaces. I've started using it back home now with some of my students, and I'm really keenly aware of some of the benefit of it. And I'm really excited to now utilize this more in my coaching. That's something that absolutely happened on this trip. And it's a part of why we've got to be together and do these things, right? Rick, every single time, forever, I learned something. You say this, we've done a few of these where it's like, I know exactly what Rick's going to say. And I come away and I'm like, God, I learned something a little bit different, whether it was the way you said it or maybe it's the way I construed it. This trip was about me understanding the power of how this device could be integrated into mental game training and my motivation to use it as a coach moving forward. So thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that big time. And I think the power of the device, like we say, two skills that I always want the players to develop. First of all is their ability to shift their state on demand, because we all know they're going to, the exact experience that girl had on the final hole with the final putt, they're all going to experience some nerves. They're going to get anxious. They're going to feel their heart rate increase at times. We're never going to say at FlowCode that's not going to happen. But we want to make sure that when they do experience that, they have tools they can rely on to shift their state back to a place that doesn't have to be full flow, but it could just be neutral. So they can still perform, they can still execute. And obviously the device plays a huge role in helping us provide that clarity to them and that belief in them that they can shift their state. Because if I ask them just to take a breath, they're like, I don't know if that actually worked. But when they see the numbers, when they see the data, and they don't see it once, but they see it twice, 3 times, 4, 10 times in a row, they now start to get that internal belief that they have the ability to shift their state on demand. That's huge. And then obviously we want to help build awareness. I think in today's world, like self-awareness is a skill that's being lost quite significantly. So any way we can help these junior golfers, but all golfers, increase their level of self-awareness, know what it feels like to be anxious and to be nervous and to feel the pressure. Know what it feels like to be in flow. Know what it feels like to be in your optimal state. And when you can start to understand that and experience it, when you recognize and you're on the golf course and you recognize you're in flow, what does that do to your shoulders? What does that do to the way you walk? What does that do to the way you see shots? Completely changes because you now know you're in your optimal state and your confidence goes through the roof. So that I think is the most powerful component of the device, is bringing those two elements. I'd say belief and awareness. Belief and awareness, self-belief, self-awareness. It helps bring that to every single student that we use it with. And then we already mentioned the other part, the fun, the competitiveness, like the joy, the smiles, the high fives. That's as well the stuff that we want to bring. And the device helps massively with that component. So for sure, I love it. Good stuff. Well, guys, I think we'll wrap up there. We've, I'm sure, got many more stories to share. We might have to do a separate episode that covers some of the behind-the-scenes stories that are maybe less about the lessons learned on the golf course and more about the lessons learned about
the success of the U.S. versus Europe in the Ryder Cup when we were there.
Yeah,
we'll do it another time.
Unfortunately, there's not enough time. There's not enough time. We've got a hard cut off at the end of this podcast, Josh. So we're going to have to save that for a podcast that
we'll do it another time.
Yeah, we'll do that never. We'll do that never. That's fine. But no, I appreciate it. I think it was a great episode. Always good to reminisce and talk about that trip and what we learned and obviously what impressed us. But until the next time, we'll see you on the next episode. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.